This podcast is part of the Democracy Group.
Welcome. We are talking politics and religion without killing each other. I am your host, Corey Nathan. It is an honor to be a part of the Democracy Group, a network of podcasts that examines what's broken in our democracy and how we can work together to fix it. And I have a big announcement. You might have seen it on social. You might have heard it in my conversation with Pete Wehner. We are on Patreon. We wanted to create a space to have better conversations where we can still disagree and challenge each other, but in a healthier way than so much of the toxic rhetoric of this political moment. I'm sure many of you have experienced that around the Thanksgiving table, around the kitchen table, around the coffee shop table, around social media and other places. I'll actually be talking a little bit about how one of those conversations went or sort of didn't really go around a bar today. But about Patreon, joining Patreon gives you access to a moderated community. It's where we can have conversations. We can talk with me and others. I'll be inviting some of our guests to have some of these conversations as well. And you'll have access to that. At higher levels, you'll gain access to TP&R merch. We got coffee mugs and all kinds of stuff. A tote bag. It's pretty cool. My friend Anna has been helping me out a lot with that, so I'm grateful. Shout out to Anna. Thank you so much. And it helps us keep the lights on too. Like it does take a lot to do these conversations, to prep, for the subscriptions, to collaborate with awesome people like I just mentioned, Anna and others that help put these programs on and hold these conversations. So, your membership really does help out. And we also value your input. So if you choose to subscribe at a higher level, you can give input and get director credits on upcoming episodes. It's really easy to join. Just go to patreon.com/politicsandreligion. That's patreon.com/politicsandreligion, and choose whatever level is best for you. As always, do the other stuff too. Subscribe or follow depending on your app, so that it really does help us move up in the ranks, so more people can discover this program and the conversations that we're having. And definitely write those reviews. We need more reviews. So if nothing else, if you could go to, in particular, Apple Podcast and leave us a review, that'd be great. We've got a really easy link in all the show notes. And as mentioned, I had an experience. A conservative and a progressive walk into a bar. No, so this is just a quick story. Well, maybe not a quick story. So it was the day that Trump got convicted. And it also happened to be the day that the Rangers, I think it was the fifth game of the Eastern Conference Final in the Stanley Cup playoff. Diehard Ranger fan, if you've been listening to this show for any amount of time, you know that, or following me online, definitely a diehard. But I had this event in downtown LA that I had to attend, but I said, at the very least, I gotta watch the first period. The event didn't start for about an hour or so. So I wasn't able to, I was going to watch the rest of the game that night, but at the very least, I was going to find some place to just, chill out, have a bite to eat, and watch the first period of the game. So there was this hotel not too far from where I needed to go, and went to the hotel bar. TV was on. I said, hey, dude, if you could turn it to ESPN, that'd be great. Turns it on just in time for the puck to drop. As the bartender is turning it to the right channel, this dude comes up to the bar just a couple seats down from where I was sitting, and he goes, Manhattan, stat. And first of all, I recognize the accent. I feel right at home right away. But second of all, that's my drink. I like to drink a good Manhattan. Usually I like it. This doesn't have anything to do with that, do with anything, but historically I've had Manhattans where they make it as if they're going to pour it up, but I hate martini glasses. So I say, pretend you're making it up so that you're going to pour it into a martini glass. But at the very last minute, don't pour it into a martini glass. Bring me a bucket, a rocks glass, and just pour it over rocks. No. Just make it up. chilled, over ice and then strain it into a bucket. Anyway, that's how I like it. And he ordered a similar drink. So I was like, oh, that's my kind of guy. And I heard the accent. I'm like, Ranger fan? He's like, yeah, what do you think? And then he started telling me about, he's a season ticket holder. He went to, that was the first playoff game or home playoff game that he hadn't attended. And they're good seats. I mean, this guy's a diehard too, because even at the playoffs, season ticket holders are usually up in what they call the blue seats, like at the top of the thing. Cause, but his seats for the playoffs, he was sitting, I forget what they call it, but it's like bridge level. At that level, there's this bridge that goes over the ice. So they were really good seats and definitely a diehard. So we started talking a little bit of Rangers, enjoying the game. And the guy knew his stuff. Like, sometimes it's if it's a casual Ranger fan or they just got into it because they were advancing in the playoffs, you can usually tell. But this dude knew, he knew what the lineups were. He knew who wasn't, up to speed. He knew who was a pretender, and I think my brother and him would have gotten along really well. But during breaks, we got to talking about some other stuff. I got to know his name's James. I got to know he's got daughters that are going to school in Florida. He's building a house in Florida. He was there to build buildings. he's a contractor, construction for large scale projects. So I got to know him a little bit. And then at a certain point, I forgot how it came up, but I said, yeah, today's been a really big day. And I was being a little coy because I was half referring to, it was the fifth game. And at that point, the Rangers were tied 2-2 in the Eastern Conference Final. But it was also the day that Trump got convicted. And he picked up on where I was going with it. He's like, yeah, it depends which side you're on. I'm like, well, to be honest, honestly, I don't really have a side when it comes to this stuff. Give me a specific issue, specific politician. Yeah, I'll end up voting one way or the other, but, I'm not this way or that way. And he's like, yeah, me neither, man. Like, I'm a conservative, but like, I don't like to say that out loud because the second you say that out loud, people like think that I'm a racist or I'm a this or I'm a that. And I get it. Especially if you're in New York, certain parts of New York, I don't know where he's told me he lives in Long Island. So certain districts, it's pretty blue. The state overall is pretty blue, but there are certain districts that are red. Either way, especially if he's in the city every day, there's you don't share out loud that you're a conservative because a lot of people can make assumptions and it's just like there's plenty of other stuff to talk about. But here's the thing: by the time we got to that part of the conversation, I already knew the guy's name. I knew, what he did for a living. I knew he had daughters. I knew what he was looking forward to. We talked a lot about the Rangers. We had plenty of other stuff, plenty of other connecting points to be able to like get into a little bit of politics. And, he brought it on, that makes sense. I understand. So we started talking a little bit about it. And he goes, well, what about you? What do you do? And I told him I got this program, Talkin Politics and Religion Without Killing Each Other. He's like, I like it. We need a little bit more of that. So I'm like, okay. And I said, honestly, we probably disagree on a bunch of stuff, but that's all right. I know you a little bit. You know me a little bit. Let's have a drink and enjoy the game. And I said, well, yeah, today's the big day. Trump got convicted. He's like, yeah, I'll probably end up going that way. Or I forget if he told me if he was voting for Trump or not, but it was clear that was kind of the direction he was leaning in. But more of what he was expressing was that he felt like he couldn't express himself out in public because he'd get attacked and assumed that he'd be like people project all of, for example, Trump's proclivities onto him. And then he'd have to be defending himself on stuff that had nothing to do with him, and it makes sense. I say, I get it. People don't know how to talk to each other about this stuff. And he goes, honestly, I'm more of a DeSantis fan. And when I enter into these conversations, my first reaction is to find a point of connection, find a point of common ground. And then maybe we could start to dig in on the nuances if we're going to have an extended conversation about an individual politician, an individual policy, or, the election in general, so I try to find a point of connection. And what I started to say was, yeah, I get that because a lot of folks were looking for an alternative to Trump who leaned conservative. And, I got to hand it to him. He was an effective executive when he first got in. The end of my sentence was going to be when he first got into office. But I couldn't finish my sentence because by that time, a lady had, another person had pulled up to the bar, wasn't watching the game with us, hadn't said hello, hadn't nothing. But before I could finish my sentence, she said, DeSantis is terrible. I think she heard the first part of my sentence. DeSantis was an effective executive. And she goes, no, he wasn't. He was terrible. He tanked the economy because he banned books. And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. I had a lot of like thoughts all at once. Before we move on, I wanted to tell you about something else that's important. Money. Specifically your money. In all seriousness, I wanted to tell you about my advisor and my friend, George Meza. George runs Meza Wealth Management. And with George, it's not just about money. It's about helping us manage our present and plan for our future. And unlike a lot of other firms out there, George and I actually have a relationship. He knows me, he knows my family, and I know his wonderful family. I also know his firm and the incredible team he's put together, from his chief investment officer to some of the other great people in his office, like Jessica, their head of operations, that are always there to help me and with all aspects of our portfolio. You see, the thing is, I got a lot going on. I guess we all got a lot going on, and I don't have the time to watch our investments all day, every day. And even if I did, I don't have the experience and expertise that George's team collectively has. So we get the entire Meza Wealth Management team, all their expertise and all their integrity. And again, it's based on George knowing me personally, knowing my goals, and even the kind of risk that's appropriate for me to take, which, by the way, could change from one season to the next. And they're on top of all of that. So if you want George Meza and Meza Wealth Management to be on your team, just visit their website, mezawealth.com. That's MEZA wealth.com, www.mezawealth.com. And that will also be in our show notes, so you can check that. And now, back to our show. Number one, like, he tanked the economy by banning books. I mean, she connected those two things. So first of all, I was checking myself to like, wait, did he tank the economy? Like, I have a lot of, listen, the truth is I have a lot of complaints with DeSantis. I've talked about it on this show. My biggest complaints about DeSantis is he's not a conservative. And a lot of his biggest pieces of legislation that he's passed aren't based on conservative principles. They're based on own the libs or where woke goes to die, the anti-woke agenda that, and that's not necessarily guided by conservative principles so much as guided by a sense of avarice or malice, if you will. But we didn't even get that far because this person, I barely even knew she was there before she piped up and she said, no, he wasn't. He tanked the economy. He bans books. And I was like, wait, did he tank the economy? Like, a lot of complaints about DeSantis, but he didn't necessarily tank the economy. But tanking the economy and then connecting that with banning books, not making sense. But my biggest objection, aside from all the I'm sitting here trying to make logical sense of it. My biggest objection was really like, hi, my name's Corey. Like, who are you? Why? Like, me and my new friend James are having a conversation over here, but you're okay. Do you have anything to say? Before I could even engage with the person, James, it was like James knew exactly what was going to happen before it happened. And then like, as if it like magically appeared, this person rolls up to the bar and did exactly what James said. I can't even say anything because then people start attacking me. So James goes on the defensive and they start butting heads. He's like, banning books. I'll tell you what, like, I know what I want my kids to learn and not learn. And, and then she just had these, like, it's what I think represents some of the worst of our public rhetoric, public engagement. She just had like rhetorical bombs to throw, rhetorical grenades to throw, because then she goes like, James is like on the defensive. And because we had the little bit of a conversation that we did already, he told me that that's what, like, he's a conservative but he doesn't like to say it out loud because people attack him, like she just did. And she wasn't even there when he was saying it. That's why he a lot of times he's a conservative and what he was concerned about. And then she just like fulfilled his prophecy in a way by the very first things that came out of her pie hole. So I don't know anything about her. She didn't introduce herself. She didn't say hello. She didn't all she did was just throw a couple of grenades our way. And then he said, I'll tell you what, I'll teach my kids what I want to teach my kids, and you teach your kids. Like, it was James's version of live and let live. And she goes, well, you want to ban books too. And you don't want people who love each other to be able to love each other. And you. And she was looking at me too, because she only heard half of the sentence of what I said about DeSantis. And then I was like, all right, I'm done. We have nothing to talk about. There's nothing for us to talk about, because you have the political sense of righteousness version of bad gas, and you just need to fart all over us. Like, that's what I was thinking. And they go back and forth a couple times, and then there's this uncomfortable silence, because I'm like, there's nothing good that's going to happen now, because not only did she come up and not even introduce herself or start to get into a conversation or have any other interest than in taking some rhetorical political grenades and throwing them at both of us without knowing anything about us, without ever having any desire to listen. So I was done. And James was too. But James, he was being still, like, I'm 30 years removed from New York, but James is still there. So James, with what I say about New Yorkers is thick skin and soft-hearted. So he's got thick skin, but he's not going to let it lie, so he's going to stand up for himself, regardless of whether I disagree with him about, me. Like, I don't like DeSantis. We could have gotten into that and why I don't like DeSantis. Regardless of whether we disagree on DeSantis or specific issues, later on we started talking about guns and stuff. Regardless, like, we had a connection. We could talk about it. But James wasn't going to let it lie. So he got into it until finally there was an uncomfortable silence, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to watch the game. It's like what Yuval Levin said. At the end of the day, sometimes you just got to say, I really strongly disagree with you. Now, Uncle Stan, pass the gravy. So with her, I was like, I don't have a relationship with her. So I have no business with you. So finish your drink and go on your merry way, because me and James are having a much more productive conversation. So that's exactly what happened. Uncomfortable silence. Me and James are watching the game. I'm like side-eyeing her, seeing how quickly she could finish her damn drink, because she's just like, yeah, you farted all over us. Now go away and take your stink with you. And that's the funny thing. The funny thing is that she and I probably feel a lot more similarly about DeSantis than me and James, but I don't want to have anything to do with her. In fact, if I was actually a persuadable voter, if I was interested and looking for information to gather about how I'm going to make a certain decision, who in the world do you think I'd be more inclined to listen to and be persuaded by? I don't know her name, so I'm going to call her Libby the Liberal or Polly the Progressive or whoever the hell she was. Certainly not her. So if her intent was to prove us wrong, she didn't do any of that. The only thing she proved is that she's an asshole. She came up, she didn't have anything to do with us. She just put her 2 cents in, and now all of it, and it turns out the rest, she got out of there. She finished her drink, paid her bill, left. Thank God. Now we can have a decent conversation. It doesn't stink as much in here. Nothing against her. It's not about her views. She didn't give us a chance to engage about the views. She didn't give us a chance to think through those views or those thoughts or those opinions. It didn't even matter, because all she did was she came in here, she came up to the bar, didn't hear even half of a sentence, and she said DeSantis, and she didn't really make a cogent point either. That's the funny thing, is that I know these issues pretty well, studied a lot of these issues and individual politicians. So that's the funny thing, is she and I probably largely agree on our views about DeSantis and his accomplishments, or, his who he is, what he's all about. But I don't care. So my greatest objection is how she engaged, or didn't really engage. All she did was come and throw some rhetorical punches at us. And what good does that do? It only turns up the heat. It only gets a guy like James to dig his heels in that much more. And it underscores and sort of proves his point that this is his experience, right? He was talking about, and I hate that this is the case, but he was talking about what, quote unquote, they do. And I'm like, I so want to, if there's any point that I would have really wanted to at least open the door to the possibility that James is wrong about, it's that not everybody is the same. Not everybody who dislikes DeSantis or is voting for Biden is the same. And I think he understood that, but he has this, it's an understandable view that people who are progressive or on the left are going to look at him a certain way. And she just proved his point. So I can't even have that conversation with him. So my takeaways from that is she didn't come up with any sense of good faith, even at a bar. Like, listen, it's a bar. You're not there necessarily to nurture meaningful relationships. You're there to have a drink. In my case, I happened to not be drinking that night, but I was enjoying the game before I had to go to this event. But to, and then if conversation ensues among unmet friends, great, but she didn't even do that well. She just came to throw some punches, rhetorical, verbal punches. But the other thing is about what she was doing was if in her mind, she was thinking that, well, others at the bar, or maybe I'll convince them about how wrong they are and to change their mind. She didn't do that very well. If anything, she dissuaded me from the merits of whatever point she was trying to make. I was no longer interested in listening to those points because of the way she went about it. So this is not a judgment on all of them, all of the liberals or all of the progressives. It's also not a judgment on all conservatives or people who identify as conservatives. If you've been listening to this program for any amount of time, you should have a sense of where I'm at on these things. That I'm not left, I'm not right, I'm a French Davidian, right? Everything is a lot more nuanced with me. And I felt like with me and James, we were starting to get there. Turns out, when the lady left, one of the reasons I didn't engage more assertively with her and sort of point out to her how unpersuasive she was being and how just obnoxious her way of going about it was that there was a man one seat over from her, and I assumed for whatever reason that it was her husband. And the last thing I wanted to do was be contentious, get in a conflict with a lady, and then have to deal with her husband. Turns out they weren't together, and he was thinking the same thing that we all were thinking, But here's a good news. Here's a happy ending to this whole thing. As soon as Polly the progressive left, everybody else at the bar, and there was like a range of views. I could take the temperature of everybody. James is to the right. I don't think he's a pro-Trumpy guy or a MAGA guy, but he's definitely historically conservative. And these days, more of like a blue collar. He's a successful guy, but I think he identifies more with what we would think of as working class, blue collar. I'm guessing because of what else we talked about, that maybe he comes from a blue collar working class family. But so that's the realm that James is, or the perspective that he's coming from. Live and let live kind of a thing. Don't overregulate me as I'm trying to make my way in the world, that kind of thing. So I got him. A couple other guys that were sitting to his right were, I could tell, maybe not wanting to engage because maybe they were a little bit more progressive or kind of left of center than he was. The guy that I thought was the husband of the lady who was obnoxious, Lefty, Libby the Lefty. Sorry. I don't mean to be dismissive with the nicknames, but she didn't introduce herself. She didn't say anything. She didn't give us a chance to get to know her at all or want to get to know us at all. So forgive me painting it sort of this two-dimensional, silly nicknames for her. But it turns out he was more of a businessman, white collar, probably conservative fiscally, didn't really get into it too much. Here's the thing, though. We all agreed that was really uncomfortable. What she just did just shut down all conversation. And then we got into talking politics and religion without killing each other. Like, hey, we could do this, right? We could have conversations, can't we? I mean, yeah. But like, if you come out of the gate without even asking me my name, like, hi, how you doing? My name's Corey, that kind of thing. Like, if you come out of the gate saying you did this and you do that and you want to do this and you want to take it, like, it's just, you lost me at not saying hello. How's that? So we all had this great conversation about how to do it better. Like, hey, get to know each other a little bit better. Like James and I were doing, and like she was the antithesis of that. So after she left, we all had a kind of a conversation in between plays about, hey, listen, we can do this. And then we all got along. James took down my information and we connected on Twitter. So I hope you're listening, James. You and I disagree on some stuff. he asked me about one of the episodes, and I shared with him that one that we did a couple months ago with Joe Walsh and Fred Guttenberg. And he's probably more aligned with Joe because I don't know if he knows Joe. Probably does. He probably recognized him if he heard him. But Joe, as the self-described rabid gun rights activist, I don't know if James would describe himself the same way, but he believes in freedom to bear arms kind of thing. We didn't get too deep into it, but he probably aligned more on that side. What he loved though was that Joe and Fred are friends. He knew Fred's name because like I said, he lives in New York now, but he has his daughters in Florida. He's got a house that he's building in Florida. So he knew about the Parkland shooting. He knew Fred's name. But he loved that. He loved that Fred and Joe, being on such different sides of a really, really heated issue, could still be friends. And now James and I are new friends, and I hope we stay in touch. But I say all this to illustrate one way of how not to do it. If you enter into a conversation that's already going on, if you want to get into the conversation, great. But maybe it's productive to introduce yourself first. Maybe it's productive. If you want to impose yourself on the situation and just do some harm, okay. You didn't really do some harm. You just came off as obnoxious. Or maybe you have to make a statement in order to get involved in the conversation. But then after that, maybe listen a little bit, maybe ask a question or two about who people are. Well, where do you stand on the issue? Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I feel very differently, but why do you feel that way? Huh, that makes sense. I didn't think of it that way. Get into an actual conversation as opposed to come in, basically ring the bell and start swinging. That doesn't do anything. It doesn't advance your cause. It's not persuasive. If anything, you're persuading other people about how much of an asshole you are and persuading people against whatever point that you're trying to make. The other side of that is James. And like I said, James and I probably disagree on certain politicians that we're going to be voting for, at least at the national level. We probably disagree on certain issues, but we probably agree on a lot of other issues. I'm a small business guy, so I'm a fiscal conservative. I'm not for a lot of regulation, that kind of thing. So there's probably a lot of other things that we agree on. But the thing is, even just in the however long I was there, 45 minutes to an hour while we were watching the first period of this game, I got to know so much more about this fella. So we had the beginnings of a relationship. I had some context for who this human being was, not just my opponent that I'm going to start throwing punches at, rhetorically speaking. But he's a human being with a family, with a job, with a story. Yeah, and that's a much better place to have conversations, especially when you get to the hard stuff like politics and religion. So I just thought that it would be interesting. It would be valuable to share that experience and some of my takeaways. And I thought you'd appreciate that too. So as always, if you dig what we're doing here, remember to follow this show, write that review, and follow us on Patreon. Again, it's patreon.com/politicsandreligion. And you can follow me on all the socials at Corey S. Nathan. That's Corey with an E and S as in Sam, Nathan, at Corey S. Nathan. Now, go talk some politics and religion. And don't just walk up to a bar and be an asshole. Get to know him a little bit, just a little bit first. And then you can have the conversations. So go talk some politics and religion with gentleness and respect, and have a great week.